I don't know how to start this, honestly. Maybe because I still haven't fully processed what happened that night. I've explored a lot of abandoned places, factories, houses, even underground tunnels, but nothing has ever compared to what I experienced in that hospital. Nothing. I had heard about the place online, an old, decaying medical facility hidden deep in the woods, long forgotten by the world. The stories surrounding it were unsettling. Whispers of unethical experiments, human test subjects, and bodies that were never returned to their families. Some said the doctors performed procedures so cruel that even the most hardened minds would shudder at the thought. I told myself they were just urban legends. I wanted them to be just legends. It was nearly midnight when I arrived. My car was parked about a mile away, hidden off a dirt road so no one would suspect I was here. The building loomed in front of me like a massive corpse, hollow and rotting, its windows shattered, its walls covered in vines. It was eerily silent. Not even the usual sounds of the forest. No crickets, no rustling leaves, nothing. Just dead, suffocating stillness. I hesitated before stepping inside, my flashlight barely piercing the darkness. The second I crossed the threshold, the air changed. It was thick, heavy, filled with a stench of mold and something sickly sweet, something rotten. I swallowed hard. "All right," I muttered under my breath, my voice barely above a whisper. "Let's do this." I started recording, my camera's little red light blinking in the darkness. The entrance hall stretched before me, lined with old, rusted wheelchairs and gurneys. The walls were peeling, revealing layers of decayed wallpaper and cracked plaster. My footsteps echoed slightly, the sound swallowed by the endless corridors stretching into blackness. The silence was unbearable. I moved forward, carefully stepping over debris, broken glass, chunks of ceiling that had caved in, old medical files scattered across the floor. The smell grew worse the deeper I went. I passed by what must have been the old reception desk, its drawers yanked open, their contents long looted. There were faded notices pinned to the walls, medical charts crumbling with age. I reached a hallway lined with patient rooms. I hesitated at the first door, then slowly pushed it open. Inside, an old hospital bed sat in the center of the room, its mattress long gone, leaving only a rusted metal frame. The walls were covered in deep scratches, as if someone had clawed at them. There were restraints still attached to the bed, frayed and discolored. A metal tray lay on the floor, its surgical tools rusted, their edges dulled by time. A chill ran down my spine. I backed away and moved deeper into the building. My flashlight flickered for a second, and I muttered a curse, giving it a light tap. It steadied. I passed by more rooms, each one feeling worse than the last. Some had broken floor stands, old examination chairs, even wheelchairs tipped over as if someone had left in a hurry. The deeper I went, the stronger the feeling of unease became, like I wasn't supposed to be here. Then I found it. A set of stairs leading down. The air coming from below was colder, like walking into a freezer. My breath turned visible in the dim light. I hesitated, staring at the darkened stairwell. Every part of me was screaming not to go down there. But I had come this far. I tightened my grip on the camera and began my descent. I took the first step down, and the wooden stair groaned beneath my weight. The air grew even colder, carrying a damp, metallic scent that I couldn't place at first, but the further I descended, the more I recognized it. Blood. Not fresh, but old. Aged into the very walls, soaked into the foundation. I swallowed hard, my grip tightening on the flashlight. The beam barely cut through the pitch-black void below, revealing a narrow corridor lined with rusted pipes along the ceiling. The walls were different from upstairs. Down here, they weren't covered in peeling wallpaper, but instead rough, exposed concrete, stained with something dark. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to breathe evenly. My footsteps echoed too loudly, making it sound like someone else was walking just behind me. The corridor led to a series of doors, each one thick, rusted, and bolted with heavy locks. Some had small, square openings near the top, like prison cell doors. I stepped closer to one, shining my flashlight through the gap. Inside was a chair. A single, metal chair bolted to the floor. No windows. No bed. No sink. Just the chair. The walls inside were covered in scratches. Long, deep gouges running from the floor to the ceiling. My stomach twisted. These weren't patient rooms. This was something else. I backed away and continued forward. The air was getting thicker, and with every step, the silence pressed down harder on my ears, making me hyper-aware of the sound of my own breathing. Then I reached the crematorium. The heavy metal doors were already slightly ajar. My flashlight trembled in my hands as I stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the smell, thick, acrid, lingering even after all these years. The room was massive, the walls covered in black soot. Along the back wall were 3 cremation ovens, their doors gaping open like hungry mouths. The metal was scorched and rusted, but inside, the ash had long settled into a hardened layer. I moved toward the ovens, stepping over what looked like shattered glass and crumbled stone. My camera picked up everything: the rusted tables, the conveyor belt where bodies were once placed, the soot-covered walls. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Loud, fast, coming directly toward me. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. It sounded like someone sprinting at full speed, bare feet slapping against the cold tile. I whipped around, pointing my flashlight toward the doorway. Nothing. The sound stopped as suddenly as it had started. I stood there, pulse hammering in my ears. My flashlight trembled slightly in my grasp. The air felt heavier, charged, like the atmosphere before a lightning strike. For a moment, I convinced myself I had imagined it. The echoes, maybe? The way sound carried in these old buildings? Then I felt it. A hand. On my shoulder. Ice cold. Clammy. Human. I didn't think. I just ran. I sprinted out of the crematorium, heart hammering so hard I could barely hear my own footsteps. My flashlight shook wildly in my grip, the light bouncing erratically off the grimy walls. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get away. The hallway stretched long before me, lined with chambers on both sides. Heavy, rusted metal doors, some slightly ajar, others sealed shut with thick iron bars. The air was dense with dust and decay, making it harder to breathe with every frantic step I took. I forced myself to stop, pressing my back against the wall. I needed to think. My chest rose and fell in ragged breaths as I tried to process what had just happened. I felt it. I know I felt it. That hand, it wasn't some gust of wind or a trick of my mind. It was real. Cold, heavy, human. But when I turned around, there was nothing. I exhaled sharply, running a shaky hand down my face. Okay. Breathe. Just breathe. The silence pressed in around me. The only sound was my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. Then, from somewhere deep in the corridor, footsteps. Again. Not running this time. Slow. Deliberate. Coming straight toward me. I held my breath, my body frozen. The sound was unmistakable. Bare feet slapping against the cold tile. One step. Another. And another. I aimed my flashlight toward the sound. Nothing. Just an empty corridor stretching into darkness. I swallowed hard, my pulse thundering against my ribs. My camera was still recording, the red light blinking steadily. If there was something here, I was catching it on film. A part of me wanted to call out, some desperate need to prove to myself that I was just freaking myself out, but I couldn't force the words out. Then, a loud bang. One of the doors at the end of the corridor slammed shut on its own. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the emptiness. I jumped back, my breath catching in my throat. No! 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 This wasn't possible. I aimed my flashlight at the door. It was one of the open ones from before, but now it was shut. I started backing away. My skin crawled with an overwhelming sense of being watched. The air felt thick, charged with something I couldn't see. Then, the running started again. But this time, it was coming from behind me. I spun around, my flashlight shaking. The corridor was still empty. But the sound? It was right there. Getting closer. I opened my mouth to scream, but nothing came out. Then, just as suddenly as it started, silence. No more running. No more footsteps. Nothing. I stood there, frozen in place, my breath ragged. I had never felt terror like this in my entire life. My irrational brain fought for control, tried to explain it away. Old buildings settle. Air pressure can slam doors. Sound carries strangely in empty spaces. But my gut, the deep, primal part of me, knew better. Something was here, and it was playing with me. I forced my legs to move, stepping toward one of the open doors on my right. If I was going to figure out what the hell was going on in this place, I needed to start looking for answers. I stepped inside, and that's when I heard it. A whisper. So close it could have been right next to my ear. Just one word. Stay. I whipped around so fast, I nearly tripped over my own feet, shining my flashlight in every direction. The whisper, it had been right next to me. Right in my damn ear. But there was no one there. My breathing turned shallow, panic pressing down on my chest like a weight. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but my legs refused to move. Then, the sound of footsteps again. But this time, they weren't just coming toward me. They were surrounding me. Soft, quick taps of bare feet against tile. Circling, moving, closing in. But my flashlight revealed nothing. Just an empty room, walls streaked with old stains and decay. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to take a step back toward the door. My hands were shaking so badly that my flashlight jittered in my grip, making the shadows dance in erratic patterns. Then, the loudest bang yet. It came from directly above me, like something massive had just fallen onto the ceiling right above my head. Dust rained down. I bolted from the room, back into the corridor, my heart hammering against my ribs. The hallway was darker than before, impossibly dark, like the shadows were swallowing the light. I aimed my flashlight ahead, and my stomach plummeted. At the far end of the corridor, near the stairwell, something moved. It was quick, just a flicker of motion, a shadow shifting too fast to be human. I froze, gripping my flashlight tighter. I needed to leave. Now. I turned sharply, heading for the opposite end of the hallway, toward the room with my equipment. I'd grab my stuff and get the hell out. But just as I reached the door, loud, slow footsteps, coming from the stairs, from the second floor. My stomach twisted. I stood there, unmoving, listening. Step, step, step. Deliberate, heavy, unnatural. Each one echoing in the dead silence, making my skin crawl. Then, the voice recorder I left inside the room crackled to life. A static hum. Then a garbled sound, distorted, almost mechanical. Then a single word, clear as day, in a voice that was not mine. Death. I staggered back, my entire body turning ice cold. Then, another word, this time rasped out through the static in a low, guttural voice. Run away from here! I felt like I was going to be sick. Then it happened. A scream. Not just any scream. A woman's scream, loud, piercing, agonized. It tore through the hallway, bouncing off the walls, rattling in my skull. It was coming from upstairs. I lost it. I turned and sprinted down the hallway, my flashlight bouncing wildly. I didn't care about my equipment anymore. I just needed to get out. I made it to the entrance, grabbing the handle, but the door wouldn't budge. I yanked, twisted, threw my entire weight against it. Nothing. Something was blocking it. From the outside. I spun around, eyes darting wildly for another way out. Then, from the second floor, the pounding footsteps started again. This time, they weren't slow. They were fast. And they were coming straight for me. The footsteps were coming fast. Heavy, pounding, and humanly quick. Straight down the stairs. Straight toward me. I whipped around, yanking on the entrance door again, my fingers digging into the rusted handle. It rattled, but it wouldn't open. Something huge was pressed against it from the other side. My mind was in full panic mode now. I was trapped. The pounding got closer. I spun back around, my flashlight trembling in my grip. Silence. Nothing at the top of the stairs. The light flickered over the empty steps, the peeling walls, the open doorways. Nothing. But I knew it was there, watching me. My breath came in shallow gasps. My stomach felt like it was twisting in knots, and I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I needed a new exit. Now. I darted my eyes around, searching. Then a loud crash from above, followed by a metallic dragging sound, like something huge and heavy scraping against the floor. That was enough for me. I turned and bolted back down the corridor. My only thought now was finding another way out. As I ran, I glanced to my left. Rows of dark, empty chambers lined the hallway, the doors hanging open like gaping mouths. Something moved inside one of them. A shape. I turned my flashlight toward it, but the bulb went out. Pitch black. I skidded to a halt, fumbling with the flashlight, slamming it against my palm. Click. The beam flickered back to life. I aimed it toward the open chamber. Nothing there. Just a dark, empty room. I was breathing way too hard. My head was spinning. I needed to calm down. But then, a whisper. Low. Right behind me. So close I felt the breath on my neck. You shouldn't be here. I lost it. I lunged toward the nearest door, not caring where it led, anything to get out of the hallway. I slammed it shut behind me, turning my flashlight around the room. A mistake. I was back in the crematorium. I had run in a circle. The furnace doors loomed in front of me, rusted metal gleaming in my flashlight beam. The gurneys stood in the corner, skeletal remains of a long-forgotten time. And then, a sound. Something small, like nails clicking against the tile, coming from inside one of the furnaces. My heart felt like it stopped beating. The furnace door creaked open. Inches. Just inches. I froze, staring. Something moved inside. I saw a hand. Not human. Thin. Gnarled. The fingers too long, too sharp. And then, it grabbed the edge of the door and started to pull it open wider. That was it. I turned and ran. I didn't care where. I just ran. Out of the crematorium. Deeper into the asylum. And into whatever nightmare was waiting for me next. I don't know how I was still standing. My legs felt like jelly, my breath was ragged, my throat dry from the sheer panic that had overtaken me. But adrenaline, pure raw, survival-driven adrenaline, kept me moving. I didn't dare look behind me as I sprinted down the corridor. I just knew I had to put as much distance as possible between myself and whatever the hell had been inside that furnace. The hallway seemed endless. My footsteps echoed against the cold walls, mixing with the sound of my own frantic breathing. And then, more footsteps. Not mine. Ahead of me, heavy, rushed, like someone running straight toward me. I skidded to a halt. The sound was getting closer. I swung my flashlight up. My hands were trembling so badly the beam shook across the walls. The hallway was empty. But the footsteps, they were right there. Thud, thud, thud. They stopped just a few feet in front of me. And then, silence. Nothing. Just my own labored breathing. I felt paralyzed. My mind was screaming at me to turn back, but turning back meant going toward the furnace and whatever had been inside. I slowly backed up, every nerve in my body screaming. My flashlight flickered, struggling against the heavy darkness. And then, in that silence, a whisper. Not loud. Not aggressive. Soft. Like someone was standing inches from my face, their lips right by my ear. "We see you." I lost my footing. My back slammed against the cold wall. I whipped my flashlight around in every direction, but there was nothing. No one. Then, suddenly, a sharp knock. One single knock. From inside one of the rooms next to me. I held my breath. Another knock. Then another. Then suddenly, bang, 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 bang. Violent, rapid, like something was slamming against the door from the inside. I stumbled away from it, my hand shaking so bad I almost dropped my flashlight. The door to the room creaked open. Just a crack. I barely had time to react before something crashed inside the room. Something big, sending dust and debris spilling into the hallway. I turned and ran. I ran like my life depended on it, not knowing where I was going, only knowing I had to get out of that corridor. The asylum felt like it was closing in around me. The walls stretched on endlessly, the flickering light barely revealing anything beyond the oppressive darkness. And then, a voice. A woman's voice. Low, almost pleading, but the words didn't make sense at first. A soft, drawn-out whisper. "Help me!" I skidded to a stop. My breath hitched in my throat. "Help me!" It came from the stairwell just ahead. The same stairwell where I had heard those slow, deliberate footsteps earlier. I hesitated. This was a mistake. I knew it was a mistake. But something about the voice, something so human in this nightmare of inhuman things, made my brain hesitate for one stupid second. And in that second, I saw her. A woman. Standing halfway down the staircase, just barely visible in the shadows. Wearing a hospital gown, torn and stained. Her hair hung in damp, tangled strands. Her head was tilted at a strange angle. Her eyes too wide, too empty. "Help me!" She took a step forward, and in the dim light, I saw it. Her feet weren't touching the stairs. She was floating, and she was coming toward me. I didn't think. I turned and ran, blindly, into the deepest part of the asylum, toward whatever nightmare was still waiting for me. I wasn't thinking anymore. My body was just moving, blindly, desperately, tearing through the endless corridors of that God-forsaken asylum. Behind me, the sound of something moving. Not footsteps, not running, just movement, like something was gliding, like something wasn't walking but still getting closer. I turned a sharp corner and nearly tripped over my own feet. My flashlight beam flickered violently, barely illuminating the hallway ahead. And then, a sound, right in my ear. A deep, rasping breath, like someone was standing beside me. Like someone was breathing down my neck. I lost it. I screamed. I ran harder than I ever had in my life, sprinting blindly through the halls. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. I just knew I had to get out. I barreled down another hallway, my heart hammering so violently I thought it would explode. The entrance. I needed to get to the main entrance. But when I reached it, the doors, they wouldn't budge. I grabbed at the handles, yanking, slamming my fists against the old wood. Something was blocking them from the outside. I was trapped. A loud bang echoed through the asylum. From the second floor, a sickening crash, like something heavy had been thrown against a wall. I felt like I was about to pass out. Then, a whisper from right behind me. "Don't leave yet." I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Instead, I did the only thing I could. I ran. I bolted down the nearest corridor, my breath coming in ragged, terrified gasps. I felt like I was being hunted, like something was toying with me, keeping me right on the edge of insanity. I tore through the abandoned hallways, barely aware of where I was going, until my flashlight caught something. A window. Broken glass. I didn't hesitate. I launched myself toward it, barely registering the jagged shards that ripped at my hands and clothes. And then I was falling. For a split second, all I could hear was the wind rushing past my ears. Then, impact. I hit the ground hard, rolling onto the cold dirt, pain jolting through my body. But I didn't care. I was outside. I was out. My body was shaking so badly I could barely get to my feet. I took off into the trees, not daring to look back. It wasn't until I was half a mile away that I realized. I left everything. My equipment, my camera, my recorder, everything. Still inside, still trapped in that place. And I swear, just as I disappeared into the woods, I heard one last whisper, carried on the wind, soft but unmistakable. "Come back!"